Benito Mussolini, ruler of Italy for decades, is considered the founder of fascism and Hitler's original role model. Within a very short space of time, he managed to concentrate all the power in Italy in his person and continue to expand the Italian colonial empire. After all, Italy not only had colonies in Greece and Libya, but also in distant East Africa. And Mussolini even managed to wrestle down Ethiopia, which had been independent for centuries. It seemed that Italy would be on an equal footing with Germany in the war, but in the end everything turned out differently. Italy revealed itself to be a paper tiger that was more of a burden than a support for Hitler. Time and again, the Italians had to be bailed out and lost almost all the important battles. But why were the Italians actually so weak in the Second World War? Why did so many people overestimate Italy, and why did Mussolini lose power so quickly? We look at all these questions in today's video. First, let's look at Italy in the pre-war period. Benito Mussolini, a former socialist and veteran of the First World War, founded the Fascist Party in Italy 1919. From the beginning, it was a radical right-wing movement based on national unity, expansion, and authoritarian leadership. The fascists used the general dissatisfaction with the post-war economy and the fear of communism to gain support. 1922 Mussolini therefore organized the A March on Rome, a demonstration of around 30,000 of his black shirts. And instead of opposing the uprising, the Italian King Victor Emmanuel III appointed Mussolini as prime minister. This marked the beginning of the fascist era in Italy, which was to last until the year 1943. And under his rule, Italy quickly developed into an authoritarian one-party state in which political opposition was suppressed and freedom of expression was severely restricted. Mussolini and his fascist party controlled all aspects of political life, from education to the media and the judiciary. Opposition parties and trade unions were banned, and people who spoke out against the regime were often sent into exile or murdered outright. This political repression created an atmosphere of fear and intolerance that characterized the social and political climate in Italy before the war. And having consolidated his power internally, he sought to increase Italy's power and influence through imperialist expansion. The megalomaniac goal was to create a new Roman Empire. And the plan was to begin with the complete conquest of East Africa. Italy already possessed large territories in what is now Eritrea and Somalia, but the Kingdom of Abyssinia, now known as Ethiopia, put up fierce resistance for decades. Alongside Liberia, it was considered the only country in Africa that could never be colonized, but Mussolini wanted to change that. And he was indeed able to achieve a victory here, albeit with massive military expenditure and the use of outlawed chemical weapons. Italy may have appeared strong to the outside world, but massive shortcomings in the Italian army were already evident beneath the surface. And the dream of a reinvigorated Italian superpower led to the annexation of Albania 1939 years before the start of the Second World War. After a short military campaign, the country was also quickly brought under Italian control, which underpinned Italy's external strength. In reality, however, Albania was not a really strong opponent, and the annexation of Albania was to remain the last significant victory. The campaigns against Greece, Yugoslavia and North Africa resulted in hardly any successes for the Italian army, and only massive German reinforcements were able to turn the tide. But why was Italy really so weak, and why was Mussolini able to hide his own weakness for so long, even from Hitler? Even Hitler himself assumed that Italy would play an important role in the alliance, and that it could conquer large territories in the Mediterranean and North Africa. As is so often the case in dictatorships, the rulers overestimated themselves, especially as they had eliminated all opposition and there were only yes-men around them. And so Mussolini always conveyed a powerful image to the outside world, even though many of Italy's shortcomings became apparent to an objective observer very early on. One of the main reasons is that Italy never even came close to the economic strength of Germany. This was not only due to the significantly smaller population, but especially to the late onset of industrialization. Compared to Germany, France and Great Britain, Italy lagged far behind right from the start. Moreover, there were only a few industrial centers in northern Italy. The south of the country was still agricultural land. Compared to other leading powers, Italy therefore lacked the industrial capacity and also the economic resources to wage a prolonged, large-scale war. In particular, there was a lack of essential raw materials such as coal and steel, which were essential for the production of war material. In addition, the war effort was hampered by the international sanctions imposed on Italy following the invasion of Ethiopia. The lack of economic strength ultimately led to the Italian armed forces being inadequately equipped and a shortage of essential war material. From tanks and artillery to airplanes, the Italian armed forces suffered from a lack of modern and effective military equipment. However, the Italian leadership also made numerous strategic mistakes that contributed significantly to the further weakening of Italy. These ranged from inadequate planning and flawed strategy to hasty military decisions. For example, the attack on Greece was poorly planned and resulted in Italian forces becoming embroiled in a protracted and costly conflict. Similarly, the decision to fight the British in North Africa was a strategic miscalculation that drew Italy into a battle it could not win. These mistakes undermined Italy's military effectiveness and led to a series of defeats on the battlefield. But Italy's geography also played a significant role. Due to its long coastlines and proximity to several theaters of war, including North Africa and the Balkans, the country was vulnerable to invasion and attack. In addition, the defense of colonies and territories in the Mediterranean and East Africa required additional resources and spread Italy's forces across multiple fronts. Furthermore, Hitler began the start of World War II just when Germany seemed strongest, but Italy entered the war before it had fully prepared for such a long-term conflict. This led to poor logistics and supplies, which posed a further problem. Italy barely managed to maintain supply lines to its army, which weakened the troops and had a particularly large impact on morale. This was already quite low from the start, and many Italians had no particular interest in a long war. And due to the many defeats, poor leadership and inadequate training, this also led to Italy's capitulation in the year 1943. Ultimately, however, this weakness also brought some advantages for Italy. Italy managed to get rid of Mussolini much earlier and free itself from fascism. It was thus able to switch sides in time and was ultimately on the winning side.